Good morning, students. Today, the topic that we'll be covering is the Patna case and Cossijurah case. Now, yesterday I told you about we did the Regulating Act of 1773. We also did what were the weaknesses of this act, the defect of the Regulating Act of 1773, and how these weaknesses or these defects were managed by the Act of Settlement that was passed in 1781. So, one of the main weaknesses of the 1773 Act was that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which was created at Calcutta in 1774, was not defined. So there was a conflict between the position of the Governor General and his Executive Council and the Supreme Court. So who was more powerful, whether the Governor General and his executive was more powerful or the Supreme Court was more powerful, was not defined. This led to three cases, and in all these three cases, the inherent defect or the inherent weaknesses between the powers which were yet to be decided between the Supreme Court and the Council, the Governor General's Council, were very much evident in all these cases. And these cases that I've just discussed with you people in our previous presentation, one was the Raja Nandakumar case that I clearly told you what were the facts of that Raja Nandakumar case, what happened in the Raja Nandakumar case. It is also known as a judicial murder because of the inherent conflict between or inherent power conflict between the Supreme Court and the Supreme Council. Raja Nandakumar was executed by the Supreme Court at Calcutta because obviously Elijah MP, who was then the Chief Justice of Supreme Court, had very good relations with Warren Hastings, and on the advice of Warren Hastings, he was executed on false charges of forgery. On the charges of forgery, but that forgery charge or that forgery was committed 5 years before the establishment of Supreme Court. So it is also known as a judicial murder. This murder took place, why? Because there was indecisiveness between the powers of the Supreme Court and the Council, which one is more powerful. Now that was one case. I'll be dealing with two more cases today. One is the Patna case and another is the Cossijurah case. So I'll be explaining both these cases to you today. And all these cases, the problems which were there in all these cases were solved by another act that was passed in 1781, that is known as the Act of Settlement. So what has been the course that I've already explained yesterday, but two cases were left to be discussed. One is the Patna case, which again shows the inherent conflict between the Supreme Council and the Supreme Court. Another is the Cossijurah case. Now, first of all, we are discussing the Patna case. Now, what has been the Patna case? This case was from 1777 to 1779. So it went for almost 2 years. Now, what was the case? The facts of the case are Shahbag Beg Khan, he was a native of Kabul, and he came to India and settled down in Patna. So Shahbag Khan actually belonged to Kabul. He came to India and settled down in Patna. He was married to Nadira Begum and acquired a large amount of money while he was there in the service of the company. So he was one of the servant of the company. He made lot of profits. He saved a lot and he acquired a large amount of money. He married Nadira Begum and he settled in Patna. But the problem was that he had no son of his own, and therefore he invented his nephew Bahadur Beg from Kabul, to reside with him with the intention to adopt him. So obviously, when he had no kids, he invited his nephew, who was Bahadur Beg. He called him from Kabul. He wanted him to reside with him with the intention to later adopt him. But before he could do so, he died in December 1776. So he was not able to adopt Bahadur Beg, and he died just after some time in 1776. The Bahadur Beg took the first step and filed a suit against the Begum in Patna Provincial Council for getting right over the property. Now, I already told you that at that time there were four provincial councils at four places: Patna, Calcutta, Murshidabad, and Dhaka. So these are the four places in which provincial councils were there. So obviously the case was filed in the Patna Provincial Council that used to deal with the civil cases. So for the civil case, obviously it's a property dispute. The case was filed in the Patna, that was the provincial council which was situated in Patna. The case was filed over there by Bahadur Beg. Now, why he filed? He got this suspicion. He had this suspicion that Nadira Begum might approach the provincial council first, claiming her share on the property. But before she could do that, he went to the provincial council of Patna, and he and he filed a suit against the Begum, saying for getting the right over the property. So he wanted to acquire the property, and therefore he filed a suit in the Patna Provincial Council before the Begum could have approached the court. Now, what happened? In the provincial court, the case placed before Mohammedan law officers, the Muslim law officers. Obviously, that was a provincial court. They were both Muslims. So I have already told you, in civil justice system, Muslim law applies for the Muslims and Hindu law applies for Hindus. So they both were Muslims. So the provincial court, they placed this case before the Muslim law officers. The officers, after full hearing, report to the council that gifts deeds were forged documents and no gift was made in favor of Nadira Begum by disease. So what they said, Nadira Begum, obviously there are certain gift deed documents that she had, claiming that this property was given to her by her husband only before dying. But when she showed these gift deed documents, the officer, after seeing that document, said that they are all forged and there was no gift which was made in favor of Nadira Begum. So obviously whatever proof she had claiming her share in property, the law officers told that they are all forged, they are the fake documents. Now, they also reported that the nephew Bahadur Beg court not be adopted under Muslim law. Okay, now what they have said, that obviously he was not adopted. Bahadur Beg, before Shahnawaz Beg could actually adopt the king, the Bahadur Beg, he died. So obviously they reported that the nephew Bahadur Beg was also not adopted under the Muslim law. Therefore, recommended that property be divided into 4 parts, out of which 3 parts were to be given to Bahadur Beg on the basis of consanguinity. Consanguinity basically means relationship by blood, because he was the nephew of the deceased. Therefore, the property needs to be, the 3 parts of the property needs to be given to him, and 1/4 of the part, that means out of the 4 parts, 3 parts should be given to Bahadur Beg because he was related to the deceased by blood, and 1 part out of these 4 parts, 1/4 of the part should be given to the widow, that is Nadira Begum. So what they recommended that the property needs to be divided into 4 parts. 3 parts were to be given to the Bahadur Beg, who was, according to the consanguinity basically means because he was a nephew, he was related to the deceased by blood. So 3 parts needs to be given to him, and only 1 part needs to be given to the widow of the deceased, that is Nadira Begum. Now, Nadira Begum was dissatisfied with the decision of the provincial council, and she filed an appeal before the Sadar Diwani Adalat at Calcutta. Now, I've already told you who is actually the head of the Sadar Diwani Adalat. Sadar Diwani Adalat is actually headed by Governor General and his council. So she filed a case in the council, Sadar Diwani Adalat. Obviously, the head of the Sadar Diwani Adalat was the council, because she was dissatisfied with the decision of the provincial council. She was not satisfied with the decision of the provincial council, which was there at Patna. We decided that the 3 parts should belong to Bahadur Beg and only 1 part should belong to Nadira Begum. And because of this dissatisfaction, she filed an appeal before the Sadar Diwani Adalat, which sits in Calcutta, and the head of the Sadar Diwani Adalat is the Governor General and his council. Now, due to the busy work routine, they could not consider the matter for a long time. Obviously, they were not able to hear this matter, and with indifferent approach to the court, she filed a suit in the Supreme Court against Bahadur Beg, Kazi and Mufti for assault, battery, unlawful imprisonment, and claimed 6 lakhs as damage. Now, what happened? I just tell you the brief story that was before. Now, when when the provincial council at Patna ordered the Muslim law officers to confiscate the property, to actually divide the property, they also has given the order to actually divide the property into 4 parts. 3 parts should to Bahadur Beg and 1 part to Nadira Begum. When these Muslim officers went to the house of the deceased where Nadira Begum used to live, they tried to molest her, assault her. They broke certain parts, certain household items. So everything, what she did, she filed a suit in the Supreme Court that is situated in Calcutta against all the officers. Bahadur Beg also, who was claiming the property, Kazi and Mufti, who went to her house and has done all the damages on the property, for assault because they assaulted her, battery, unlawful imprisonment because they tried to confine her, and claimed 6 lakh as damage. So she went to the Supreme Court and claimed that I want 6 lakhs compensation from them who Bahadur Beg, Kazi and Mufti, because they physically assaulted her, they untreated her. Now the Supreme Court issued order to arrest Bahadur Beg, Kazi and Mufti. So what was the order given by Supreme Court? Supreme Court ordered that to arrest Bahadur Beg, who was the nephew, who was to be the adopted son, but he could not be adopted before the adoption, the deceased died. And the Supreme Court also ordered the arrest of Kazi and Mufti, the law officers who went to her house to confiscate the property or to divide the property. Now, the Supreme Court decided that the documents were genuine and that Kazi and Mufti did not act in good faith. So, whatever documents were produced by Nadira Begum, Supreme Court decided that all the documents were genuine, and Kazi and Mufti actually did not act in good faith. That means for the purpose that they actually went to divide the property, they actually assaulted her and were ill-treated her. Now, the court awarded the damages of rupees 3 lakh in favor of Nadira Begum, and the law officers were imprisoned. That means what was the decision of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court awarded damages of rupees 3 lakh in favor of Nadira Begum. So Nadira Begum got almost 3 lakh from them, and the law officers, which was Qazis and Muftis, were imprisoned. They were put in prison. Now, the whole case was bitterly criticized on the grounds that which law Bahadur Beg and law officers were subjected to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So it was actually not decided that the law officers were actually the officers of the the provincial court. So whether they are under the subjected to the jurisdiction of Supreme Court or not, that was not defined. And secondly, what law was Bahadur Beg had to follow, that was also not defined, by which grounds he can be subjected to the jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Now Bahadur Beg used to reside in, first of all, he came from Kabul. Second, he used to reside in Patna. So provincial court of Patna's decision should be final, or the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court will be applicable in this. That was also not decided. And the Supreme Court justified his jurisdiction over Bahadur Beg as a former and paying land revenue to the company. So it was decided that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is subjected to all those who are paying land revenue to the company. So he was also a former paying, he was also a part of the scheme. He also used to pay land revenue to the company, and on the basis of that, Supreme Court had jurisdiction on it. So Supreme Court obviously justified this by saying that the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over Bahadur Beg, and therefore he was imprisoned. He gave damages of 3 lakh, and the other officers were imprisoned. Now, see what the judgment, what the court said actually was. I'll be telling you that Bahadur was like a revenue collector and was directly or indirectly in service of the company. Because he was there in the service of the company, he falls within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And secondly, the Patna Council has jurisdiction to decide disputes between Indians, but has no jurisdiction to delegate its function to law officers, Qazis and Muftis. That means even if the provincial councils has had the jurisdiction in this case, but the council should not extend this to Qazis and Muftis, that they can go to ill-treat Nadira Begum and confiscate the property or divide the property. So basically, everything even had to be done through provincial court at Patna only. It should not be that responsibility should not be delegated to Qazis and Muftis. So this was the judgment. This was the court decision. The Supreme Court decided this. So ultimately, you can also understand this, that the council, there is a conflict directly between the council and the Supreme Court in this case, whether the decision of the provincial court at Patna, which was there, should be final, or the Supreme Court decision has to be final. So again, there is a conflict. So this is the Patna case. I'm just summarizing what is the Patna case. There is a person who came to Kabul, settled in Patna, and was residing with he got a lot of riches from by serving in the company. He married Nadira Begum, and because he had no son, he wanted to adopt Bahadur Beg as his son. But before he could adopt, he died. There was a battle for property between Nadira Begum and Bahadur Beg. Bahadur Beg filed a suit in the provincial court at Patna. The provincial court at Patna decided that the property needs to be divided into 4 parts. 3 parts should go to Bahadur Beg, 1 part should go to Nadira Begum. This actually happened, but because Nadira Begum was dissatisfied, she filed a suit in the Sadar Diwani Adalat, where Governor General used to sit. because the Sadar Devani Adalat was busy with too many cases, she filed the suit in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that yes, the Kazis and Muftis, the law officers, had done wrong to Nadira Begum, and the court awarded almost 3 lakh rupees compensation to Nadira Begum. So this was a decision of the Supreme Court. This entire case is known as the Patna case because it is situated in Patna. This I hope you have understood. Now I move on to the second case, that is the Cossijurah case. Now what are the facts of this case? Raja Sundar Narayan, who is the Zamindar of Cossijurah, took a very big amount of loan from Kasinath, who was a financier of Calcutta. Now Kasinath was a financier of Calcutta. He used to give loans to people. Now so Raja Sundar Narayan was the Zamindar of Cossijurah. Cossijurah is a place, and he got a lot of amount, like he asked for a loan from Kasinath. Now, what did Kasinath do? Kasinath gave him that money, but the loan remained unpaid for a considerably long time. So basically, that loan which he asked, which was given to Raja Sundar Narayan, was left unpaid for a very long time. And later, what happened? Kasinath brought a suit against the Zamindar in the Supreme Court. So Kasinath, because the loan remained unpaid, Kasinath filed a suit against the Zamindar in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court issued orders to arrest Zamindar. Now, what Supreme Court ordered? Supreme Court ordered to arrest the Zamindar, Zamindar Sundar Narayan. The Zamindar went underground to avoid his arrest, and obviously because he knew that he'll be arrested, he went underground to avoid his arrest. The collector of Midnapur informed the Governor General due to the Zamindar absence, the revenue collection was suffering. Now, the collector of Midnapur said, because he's a Zamindar, the work of the Zamindar is obviously to collect the revenue. He informed the Governor General, that means the council, he informed the council that because of Zamindar's absence, the revenue collection is suffering, and therefore the Governor General and his council came into the picture, because they were informed by the collector of Midnapur that the Zamindar is underground, he is not there, and revenue collection is suffering, and obviously the company does not want the revenue collection to suffer. Now, based on the advices of Advocate General, government directed Zamindar not to attend before the court. Now, what was the advice? Advocate General is basically, in my notes I have written commander of the government. The commander of the government or Advocate General advised the government, that means the council, Governor General's council, that to direct the Zamindar not to attend before the court, not to present himself before the court, because if he'll present himself before the court, then only he'll be tried, otherwise he'll not be tried. The Governor General also stated that no Zamindar was subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Now, what was decided by the Governor General? The council decided that no Zamindar, because Zamindar directly comes under the East India Company, because their work is to collect the revenue, they directly come under the government. No government employee or no servant of the company is subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. That means the court cannot interfere in the internal matters of the company, and therefore no Zamindar is subjected to the jurisdiction of the court. The court cannot punish the Zamindars. With the absconding of Zamindar, court issued orders to seize the property of the Zamindar. Because the Zamindar was not available, the court decided to seize the property of the Zamindar. So whatever the property of the Zamindar was seized by the Supreme Court, because he was not attending, he was not going to the court on the advice. The Sheriff of Calcutta with some forces were sent by the court to execute the orders of Supreme Court, and they arrested Zamindar also. So what the Sheriffs of Calcutta, the people of you can say the police, the cops of Calcutta with some forces, by the order of the Supreme Court ordered these sheriffs of Calcutta to seize the property of the Zamindar at first place and to arrest the Zamindar also. They went to Zamindar's place to seize his property, and over there they found Zamindar also, so they arrested the Zamindar. On hearing about this incident, the Governor General and Council also sent a small force to arrest Sheriff and his party and release the Zamindar from arrest. So obviously this is a dispute between the Council and the Supreme Court also. So when Governor General heard this, that sheriffs by the order of the Supreme Court has went to seize the property of the Zamindar and they have arrested the Zamindar. On hearing about this incident, the Governor General Council sent its small forces to arrest these sheriffs, which were sent by the Supreme Court, and to release the Zamindar from arrest. So Zamindar has to be released from the arrest. sheriffs were sent. The governor general's forces arrested the sheriffs along with his party, and they were released afterward. So what had happened, the governor general forces, with the small force that was sent by governor general, they arrested these sheriffs, which came by the order of Supreme Court. They arrested these sheriffs, and they were later released afterwards. The judges became angry. Sorry, this remove this word. The judges became angry and felt insulted. Obviously the judge felt insulted because their sheriffs, like the people who were the cops that were sent by them only, were arrested. The judges became angry, felt insulted. However, the court took an action against North near Advocate General. So that on the advice of Advocate General, only the Governor General asked the small forces to arrest the sheriff. So the court took an action against that Advocate General, who was advising the Governor General not to follow the order of the Supreme Court, and the Zamindar should be absconding. So that Advocate General was. The court took an action against him on the plea that the wrongly advised instead of the right day, that they wrongly advised the Governor General for defying the orders of the court, and he was tried and sent to jail. So what happened? Not Naylor Advocate General, who gave the order to the Governor in General that Zamindars are not a part there, that do not come under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The court took an action against him. And why the court took action against him? Because he wrongly advised the Governor General for defying the orders of the court. That means the Governor General was not listening to the orders of the court. Because of that, the Advocate General was arrested, because he was the one who was advising the Governor General to defy the orders of the court, and the Advocate General was sent to jail in this case. So if you know what has been the result, this is actually the inherent weakness and defect of the Regulating Act. Because of this weakness and defect of the Regulating Act, it was still not clear that who has major power, the Governor General. Obviously, when Advocate General is arrested, it basically shows that the Governor General has less power and the Supreme Court has more power. But what has been the decision which took after the passing of the Act of Settlement of 1781? The major decision that took place after the passing of the Act of 1781 was that the council, the Governor General and the council, because they formulate the government, they look after the administration of India, they have more power of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court was at Calcutta, which was situated at Calcutta, was given less power as compared to the power of the council. So council was more important than the Supreme Court. This was the major decision which was taken by Act of Settlement. And it also stated that if there is a servant of the company, he no longer comes within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So this was later cleared in the Act of Settlement, which came up in 1781. But before the Act of Settlement, which actually came in 1781, the three cases actually did a little wrong to the people. The Raja Nandakumar case, it actually led to the murder, it actually led to the execution of Raja Nandakumar. Second was the Patna case that we have seen, that Kazis and Muslim the law officers were arrested. The Nadira Begum was given 3 lakh as compensation from the Supreme Court. So in all these cases, we can see the Supreme Court decision was valued more. But by the Act of Settlement of 1781, it is actually the Governor Council whose decision became more important. The position of Governor General and his council became more important than the position of the Supreme Court, which is situated at Calcutta. So these are the cases that you should know. The Patna case, which was from between 1777 to 1779. Then the Cossijurah case. What you should know about the facts of the case, what were the issues that were raised in that case, what was the judgment given, and what was the actual implication or the impact of this case. And lastly, you have to write a little bit about the Act of Settlement also, how the Act of Settlement actually solved this inherent disputes which were there between the Supreme Court and the Supreme Council. So this is the end of the lecture. In case you have any queries regarding this, then you can mail me. My mail address is swati.saxena@alc.edu.in. I've already shared my mail address with you. Now the question, I'll just tell you how the question can come. The question can come like this, that what what were the inherent defects in the functioning of the Supreme Court and Supreme Council, and how these defects were settled by the Act of Settlement, which was passed in 1781. The question can also come like this: what were the three cases which actually defined, that actually show the inherent weaknesses or defects between the functioning of Supreme Court and Governor General and his council, and how these defects were later resolved or corrected by the Act of Settlement of 1781. So if any case the question comes like this, you have to answer. In case of any doubts or any problems, you can mail me. This is the end of the lecture. Thank you and all the best.